When I say RAISY, what is the first thing that comes to your mind? A calm, ice-cold machine, world record holder in Quake 3 speedrunning, or perhaps the only player in the scene who has and will probably ever achieve 12 second place finishes in major events? As for me, RAISY is one of the most human players in the scene that I can think of. He's very humble, very respectful, but also quiet and reserved. The type of guy that I, a massive introvert, would naturally come along well with. Now, as for that last part, I have had a deep chat with Adrian for over 2 hours here on YouTube, where he really opened up to me and explained his entire approach to his life as a competitive Quake player. But aside from that, however, at events we have of course talked, but not nearly as much as I've spoken to other players. At events, RAISY is in his zone, whether that is sitting by himself or with his girlfriend who always accompanies him to the events, playing some chill games on his PC while waiting for his match to start, or not being at the event at all, preparing himself for his match somewhere else, in his own way. Adrian has always fascinated me. Of course, every player has their own routines, their own ways of approaching competitive play. But when a visibly emotionless person walks up on stage in a grand final, sits down in the chair leaning back with one leg resting awkwardly on top of the other, and still plays absolute top level Quake, you just need to ask yourself, how does he do it? Does he just disconnect his emotions somehow? Adrian did actually answer this question in the long deep dive into his career that we did. I will link it in the description. He said that he might look calm, but in reality, there's a lot of things going on inside his head. He's just good at masking it. I remember in Barcelona KeenCon 2022, when the organizers had decided to put heart rate monitors on every player up on stage. During the grand final, in the last game that went to sudden death on Awoken, his heart rate was up to 169. But perhaps the most important topic for today is, without rubbing it too much in his face, 12 second place finishes in major tournaments. For Adrian, it's really gotta suck. You can only assume that for someone with as high ambitions as him, a gold trophy is everything he could have ever asked for. And especially as the silver medals keep piling up in his trophy cabinet. But let's just for a moment understand how incredible that is. It's not 1, 2, or 3, or 4, or even 5. It's 12. In 12 different major tournaments, he managed to fight his way through the entire bracket and make it to the grand finals. That's a freaking legacy if I know one. Still, I know how it is. Sometimes you have to be a perfectionist. So let's go through all these second places to really get a better view of how this incredible feat came to happen, and most importantly, how insanely close they have been so many times. What would have had to change for the outcome to be different, for RAISY to be crowned the winner? Hopefully we can get a better look at that now. We start off in 2018 at Esports World Convention in Paris. Now, this wasn't the most stacked tournament. From what I've heard, a majority of the player base were prepping for another tournament, or they simply wasn't drawn to this one because of the limited prize money, at least according to the standards back then. RAISY did however beat Klaus, his teammate Garpy, some random Frenchman named Thorky, and then Garpy again in the playoffs before losing to Klaus 2-3 in the grand finals. And this was after winning the first two maps before dropping the final three. Bad luck. But there was hope on the horizon. It was his second grand final in a Premier tournament. He had previously won DreamHack Denver already back in 2017. But there was a lot more to go. After this tournament, Adrian went to Italy, to the Italian Esports Open, and he won it. He even beat Rafa in the finals, taking 4 maps in a row after being down one. Now, I'm bringing this up in the beginning to make a point. Adrian has won several high-level competitions in Quake, let's not forget that, but this video will highlight all the second place finishes, just to stick to somewhat of a line throughout. Otherwise, I could make this video as long as our interview itself, but at that point you might as well just watch that video instead and hear it from Adrian himself rather than some random dude who has never played this game professionally. Anyway, back to the video. Next second place finish. Quake Pro League Stage 1 Finals, a 0-3 loss against Cooler. Not a map taken, but 2 very close ones. Final score 7-8, 7-16, and 5-6. Map 1 and 3 could have gone the other way for sure. That would have changed the outcome entirely. Next one, Quake Pro League Stage 2 Finals against Rafa in the Grand Finals. 0-4 scoreline, but Rafa obviously had the 1 map advantage. Now, I'm sure many of you can think of all the times Adrian has come back from the lower brackets, all the way, always battling with a slight disadvantage. Well, it becomes even clearer when we look through the results like this. Adrian's history with lower brackets is longer than you might think. Anyway, The scores in this final were 2-9, 1-15, and 8-11. Confident finishes for Rafa. So next up, Quake World Championship 2020, a replay of the previous tournament almost. A 0-4 defeat against Rafa again, but he had an upper bracket advantage. Maps this time, 2-10, 3-14, 2-17. A struggle, to say the least. Well, with two grand finals that he had barely had a grip on like that, it was time for a third time is the charm moment in Quake Pro League Season 2, Stage 1 Finals. Once again, Rafa and RAISY were in the grand finals, but this time RAISY put up a hell of a fight. Final score 3-4, really down to the wire. Rafa, once again coming from the upper bracket, had the first map advantage. RAISY then won map 1 or 2 depending on how you see it, 9-6. Rafa came back in map 3, 12-4. Then RAISY took 2 in a row, 7-6 and 8-6. Nail biters, but a win is a win. In the last map, Rafa decides enough is enough and runs away with 15-5, once again claiming the title. But it had now become clear that RAISY was capable of beating the American. He just had to find that last piece of the puzzle. Alright, on to the next. Quake World Championship 2021. RAISY finds himself, once again, with one map disadvantage against teammate Wenger. Maps went as follows, 7-8, 12-10, 10-11, 8-5, and finally 2-8 in the final map. In the end, the Italian bested him. But really only in the last map. In the other maps, the Hungarian was breathing him down the neck, once again showcasing how close he has been to holding that trophy. I mean, look at these scores, back and forth like a damn yo-yo. Incredible! I think many people can remember this final in particular. I certainly do, at least. Anyway, next up, Iron Fist Invitational in London, the first proper Quake LAN after 2 years of COVID mayhem in the world. Everyone was excited to be back on LAN, even if that event was technically not played on a LAN server. It was played on the London server, and we were in fact in London. Well, that's as close as LAN as you can get. Either way, in the grand final it was, well, you've guessed it, RAISY and Rafa. And you can guess where RAISY came from? The lower bracket, of course. The American had his comfortable map advantage and took the first map 8-7. The maps that followed were 11-7, 11-12, 8-7, and 6-7. My goodness, another one of those nail-biter games. Think about the last two maps. 2 frags away from winning, or maybe just one to get into a favorable rotation, take it to overtime, and then claim the last frag without even lifting a finger. You know how simple Quake can be sometimes, when you get that control. At this point, Adrian had already gone up against Rafa 4 times in grand finals, and he was going to be more than that. Jump to the next Quake World Championship in 2022. Such a great event, I must say. I was there, and we were treated like kings. The food was amazing, the hotel was incredible, the venue was fantastic, friendly, and spacious. Shuttle back and forth between the hotel and venue, even if it was just a 5-minute walk. Well, at least I felt like a movie star. Anyway, getting sidetracked. This time Rafa was the one who had to taste the lower bracket. Well, RAISY was in fact down there as well, but he only had to play one match in there this time, contrary to the American. And can you guess who he played against? Rafa. And he beat him 3-2. The curse was broken. Very back and forth as you can see in this image. But come on, he beats him, that's what matters. The only problem was, this wasn't a grand final. That matchup awaited Adrian further on, and this time Kilson was the one waiting there. RAISY crawled his way through the final bracket and eventually found himself in another grand final. And the result? 3-4. Again, a super close matchup. And I was there. I watched it live. I remember it was already getting late. The schedule was running way behind. And look at these freaking maps, man. It even seems unreal how close it is. One small mistake and the map is lost. And that's literally what it came down to a degree. I mean, eventually Kilson ran away with it, and I remember how RAISY came walking out of the player area afterwards. It was a few minutes past midnight, and he went straight to the player food that had been left, perhaps only for him, and sat down to eat. All of us had eaten 6 hours ago, but he had decided not to. If I remember correctly, he later explained how he hadn't eaten much in order to prevent getting slouchy and tired, but also because of a very packed schedule with breaks that were too short to both eat in peace and then get back in the groove to play, and the amount of matches he had been forced to grind through to get to the grand finals. I mean, Kilson had only played 4 matches in the entire bracket before the finals, contrary to Adrian, who had played 6. And 2 more doesn't sound so much, perhaps, but these are long matches, many maps, a lot of thinking, preparing, and energy being drained in every one. Well, he was exhausted there in Bucharest. I could clearly see that. Exhausted and likely very disappointed. Again, I'm just trying to highlight the deficit he has often found himself in when facing a grand final. But obviously this is a tournament setting. It can be the same for everyone. This time Kilson had the flow and made it all the way. I'm not taking anything away from him, of course. In the end, it was another silver medal for Mr. RAISY. After a break for only 1 month, RAISY decided to go across the globe to Australia in his pursuit for a gold medal. KwachiCon didn't boast so many international players. Most of them were Australians, including his teammate Zenagu. Aside from Canadian Chain, there was only one more player there from a different country, Rafa. And once again, fate decided that they were going to meet in the grand finals. Because who else? The final result was a 3-0 victory for Rafa, and RAISY was once again ripped away from his dream. The map scores were 6-7, 4-8, and 3-9. Well, maybe that last part of the puzzle was still missing. Alright, next up, Barcelona KeenCon 2022. Perhaps not a major event, but I still decided to include it. There were, I think, 6 pro players there, and the rest were local Spaniards ranging in all different skill levels. Still, RAISY came to the lower bracket, couldn't hold back crowd favorite Myztro, and fell with a 1-3 scoreline. Maps 8-10, 9-10, 4-3, and 2-4. Pretty tight, right? I mean, I hope you start to see a pattern emerging here at this point. Anyway, we've worked our way through his major grand finals and we're eventually in 2023. The World Championships in Dallas at QuakeCon no less. Back after 4 years. And RAISY worked his magic and made it all the way to the grand finals again. And who waited there? Rafa. At this point I always wondered, no matter how good you are at the game, no matter how much you worked on the mental side, is it possible not to feel a certain doubt when going up against someone you've lost to in the grand finals 4 times before? I mean, you've guessed it. Adrian came from the lower bracket, and Rafa had a 1 map advantage just as usual. The maps went like this: 9-6, good start for RAISY, and then 7-8, 4-17, and 4-5. 2 close maps and 1 not so close map. But again, if those 2 close maps had gone in his favor, he could have walked away with the win. And this was Rafa's 1 millionth win or something, and also the 5th time he beat RAISY in a major grand final. But there was going to be more. Barcelona KeenCon 2023, the last event of the year. Rafa was hungry. He had won Quake World Championships, the Foundry just a week before, and now he wanted to plow through the Barcelona LAN as well. And he did. Another grand final, another upper bracket advantage. And who came from the lower? Yep, the one and only. Maybe it was too much for RAISY. Maybe he couldn't hold back the ghosts inside his head, going up against the American for the 6th time in a grand final. Or maybe Rafa was simply too unstoppable this year. What did they put in the water in America? Whatever it was, RAISY couldn't hold him back. All 3 maps slipped out of his hands. But again, 2 of them were close. 2-3, 6-15, and 6-8. And just like that, the year was over. And so was QPL. And perhaps Quake as a whole. We're now 8 months into 2024, and not much has happened except KeenCon, of course. That's what we're all waiting for. But RAISY, let's just say it seems that his ambitions have slightly shifted, and I can understand his decision. He did kind of the same thing as StrongSage did, and what many other players have probably thought of doing and will eventually do if things continue like this. He moved on. He moved on, but he went back to his roots. Counter-Strike. Yes, RAISY did in fact compete in Counter-Strike way back, before entering the world of competitive Quake champions. Going by the name No Fear, he was a well-known name in the Hungarian community, but he also had several international appearances. Even I had heard of him back then, since I was also very active in CS at the same time as him. Well, after 7 years of inactivity, he decided to give it another go. At 29 years old, he is now leading a group of young Hungarians in ECA Intermediate. They're hoping to qualify to the league above ECA Main, which is kind of the middle grounds in the competitive ECA ladder. If they make it there, the competition starts becoming pretty decent, but it's obviously still very far from the absolute top tier 1. And I know, he hasn't retired from Craig. I suppose, well, I hope he will still show up in Barcelona with Wenger and take the scene with storm, but I can't help but feel like he doesn't have the same motivation to grind the game anymore. And can you really blame him? Think about how much opportunity there is in CS, and especially for someone like him who actually used to be really good at the game. Skills wither away, but only to a certain degree. The foundation he once built is still there, no doubt. Well, it will be very interesting to follow his development over on that side, and I wish him and his team the best of luck. Anyway, to round this video off, I hope that you got a better view of his second place finishes now. It's easy to just see the results, but there's a lot more to it than that. Many things play a role in this level of competition. Even the smallest details can be detrimental, and especially in a game like Quake. It's like one of the least forgiving games, for Christ's sakes. I mean, just like chess, one mistake and you're out. Add to that the amount of times he came from the lower bracket, the amount of times the player he went up against had the map advantage, the times he had to grind through several more maps than the other finalist, and I'm sure there's even more to it than that. But in the end, he well and truly showed that he was capable of beating everyone. This video has highlighted only his second place finishes, and I think it can kind of feel the same for him in a way. At what point did the entire plow through the bracket become nothing but a mundane task before he stood on the stage ready to play a grand final again? To him, I can imagine that it kind of feels that way. But think about it how it is for other players. Every match is an insane struggle, and many are more than happy to make it to top 6, top 8, even top 12. But not Adrian. For him, there was only one goal, a first place finish in a major. Nothing else mattered. And while he did achieve that a couple of times, he fell short with only a few frags so many times. As silly as it may sound to him, and as I wrap this video up, that's a freaking legacy and a half. I say that again. And let's not forget that. Thank you for watching.